Coming up on this episode of the Roundtable.
Right now, people are too demoralized and whiplashed by COVID and by the omni suck to confront the magnitude of these questions. But I think, deep down, people are aware that this is what is on the line. This is what is at stake. Someone is going to have to come up with a serious proposal that isn't going to replace our form of government with an automated woke social credit system, and isn't going to let it slide into third world potentate status with a vast administrative state that no one can ever remove from power.
Welcome once again to the Roundtable, first editors and publishers podcast of the year here at the American Mind. It's 2022. It's our 101st episode, and we are back. You thought that I had run out of ways to shoulder Ryan Williams, our publisher and president, out of the host's chair, but at the last minute, I'm back tanned, ready and rested, and I came up with the idea of infecting Ryan with Omicron. So now he has COVID, and I'm hosting yet again. That actually wasn't my fault. Everybody has got Omicron. We're all, I have it, you have it, we've all got it. So we're basically all recording from home. We don't actually all have it, although a lot of us do. We discussed that on Tell Me What You Really Think, and this is when it's a good time to be recording remotely. In any case, I am joined also remotely by our executive editor, James Poulos, our managing editor, Seth Barron, and our founding editor, Matthew Peterson. I'm Spencer Clavin, features editor here at The American Mind. And as the new year dawns, we've got some of the same old BS to talk about. Of course, the anniversary of January 6th is coming up. You'll probably be listening to this on the day of. We're recording it a day in advance, but already the retrospectives and the trauma porn is thick on the ground. Here's Merrick Garland, Attorney General, out here making promises to persecute everybody that, so far as I can tell, even watched video of January 6th and the storming of the Capitol. He says the actions we have taken thus far will not be our last. The Justice Department remains committed to holding all January 6th perpetrators at any level accountable under law, whether they were present that day or were otherwise criminally responsible for the assault on our democracy. That's a pretty broad remit, not exactly totally sure what it means. I'm sure we'll find out, or perhaps even more sinisterly, we won't find out. But Garland has made noise of this kind before, including in front of Congress. He sort of assured us all that there's going to be all sorts of methods of surveillance and imprisonment brought to bear. There's a nice piece that our own Seth just put on the site called Does Anyone Care About January 6th, sort of putting into context the parade of tearful, post-traumatic interviews that we've been subjected to of this day, which, again, not, in my view at least, not the best day for America, not a advisable or good thing that happened, kind of a buffoonish mistake on the part of the protesters at the Capitol, but certainly in context, and in the context of our ongoing national crisis, not the catastrophic threat to our democracy that it's been made out to be. It's kind of been turned into a sort of Reichstag fire, and certainly into a pretext for all sorts of executive overreach and continued surveillance. We're going to get in a second to some of the sort of knock-on effects and consequences, but before we do, let me just pass it over to the guys and ask, what do you think we can expect, if anything, from the anniversary of January 6th, besides a lot of hand-waving and tearful interviews on CNN?
I think there'll be a lot of tearful interviews. I think there'll be a lot of hand-waving, as you said. I'm just kind of interested. Last year, according to the FBI, some 60,000 cops were injured, like 30% of them very seriously. In all these riots, police have been shot and killed. You never hear anyone on CNN or MSNBC raise an eyebrow over any of that stuff. I mean, this just happens all the time. I mean, here's the thing: being a cop is like a really dangerous job. But to listen to the Capitol Police, you'd think that you'd think that you were talking to, like, I don't know, like a park ranger who was set upon by a mob. Like, who told these police that they were never going to be in a riot? I'm not saying that we shouldn't, feel sorry for them if they got hurt or whatever, but it's just kind of weird that there's so much attention. And the thing is, people laugh at police when they get like hurt. Like nobody, like the left does. They don't care. So it's real crocodile tears. And regarding does anybody care? I'm not saying it's like you said. Look, it's it was kind of an ugly episode, but I've not heard any normal person at all like ever mention it, talk about what a shame, like anything. Just nobody. I mean, I feel like the whole January 6th theme or meme, like Day of Infamy type of thing, it's strictly within the confines of like, people who recite Democratic talking points, like the media, consultants, politicians. I've never heard anybody else bring it up, mention it, worry about it, anything.
The itinerant Portuguese diplomat Bruno Macias, who's out there on Twitter most every day, remarked from his view abroad that he only ever hears Americans talking about January 6th. And oh, how they talk. The Atlantic tells us that January 6th is now every day. The Daily Beast tells us that the real tragedy of January 6th is that it's still not over. Do these guys have a plan B? The plan B isn't to run on Joe Biden's record. Plan B isn't to finally get Biden out of the way so that some great and glorious new figure can step forward and lead, that faction to some kind of stable governing majority. You look at the polls, the polling averages. Trump is up almost 5%, and that is not because. Is not because whatever it is, 51.2% of Americans broke out the popcorn on January 6th, popped some champagne bottles. It's because the people in charge are failing. They are failing our form of government. They are failing our people, and they're failing even on their own terms. They can't even do what it is that they say they want to do, and even judging themselves by their own standards, they are failing. And there is no plan B, none that we're aware of. The jokes are out there. The conspiracy theories are out there. But when you look around you, if the technological situation grows more and more concerning, the political situation grows more and more farcical. These two things are probably interrelated. And so, we're going to keep hearing about this because the information industrial complex doesn't really have any other way, any other powerful way of grabbing viewers by the eyeballs and shaking them into submission. With Trump isn't even doing his Jan 6 presser or whatever on the steps of Mar-a-Lago. He's doing something later in Arizona, and this infuriates them too. Because, that means that instead of having Trump to fill the news, they have to just keep relying on Jan 6, Jan 6, Jan 6. The Dems want to put up a permanent memorial to January 6th. They're trying. They're trying to pull out all the stops, but they're running out of options. There's this continual drip of what appears to be soundly reported news that, not shockingly to anyone who has listened to this podcast, there appear to have been classic intelligence asset guys on the ground doing suspicious things, cutting holes in fences and urging random people to go through those holes, perching themselves in strategic locations and shouting out, directions, trying to rile up the crowd and get some sort of momentum in through the breaches that magically or not so magically appeared. So this is not going away. And it's not entirely clear to me, at least, that that this is going to be as much of a millstone around the neck of Trump or Trump supporters or the GOP or the right or whatever, just Americans who realize that things are as bad as they are and are mad about it. This is a mess. It's been a mess from the beginning, and it's going to remain a mess. And I think that wiser heads in various factions are probably coming to terms with the fact that it's in their own interest to just move forward, because there's plenty of stuff to do, plenty of political battles to be fought, and events keep unfolding. The world turns on, and people who get stuck on January 6th are, I think, not going to be able to keep up with the hamster wheel.
Yeah, the fakery is just so loud on this one, and this is a problem everywhere, but particularly with January 6th, it's so hard to kind of claw your way through the hysteria and the totemization and just the constant drumbeat of like weird narrative peddlers who, as you say, James, are desperate for us to be riveted by this event and its anniversary because they have absolutely nothing else to show for themselves, no clarity to bring to any of the situations we face, no information to share with us that might be helpful in adjudicating the problems that ordinary Americans are dealing with, problems like, inflation and being able to run their lives as they see fit. They don't actually want us to have any information that would help us to do that. And so instead, from the very beginning, from the very moment that January 6th even occurred, there was, as I said earlier, the kind of lamentable, regrettable actual thing that was happening, which in and of itself was not particularly, carefully formulated or interesting so much as just lamentable. And it's become clear ever since, in fact, if you've been actually watching, that that's exactly what it was. There was no grand design. There was no plan. Trump was effectively telling people explicitly not to go storm the Capitol. It did not. They sort of wandered around. There were some unfortunate injuries that, in fact, somebody died. One of the protesters herself died. So that was kind of, itself sad. But all of this has now been completely obscured by a drumbeat of madness and consent manufacturing and just random craziness. Meanwhile, as you say, you look at this Real Clear Politics poll. I'm looking at it right now. It's hardly been widely heralded or drawn attention to. But the fact that despite all of this, Trump leads Biden by 4.8 points in the Real Clear Politics average of polls for 2024. Not like, what would you do if you could go back to 2020 and cast your vote over again? Not in the abstract, do you like one or the other people better, but do you want Trump or Biden in 2024? The Democrats themselves know that Biden is a disastrous candidate, but nobody is paying attention to the fact that, what's really going on here is people have completely moved on from this event in, a year ago, are focused on the situation around them on the ground. They're not dummies. They're not hoodwinked by this endless drumbeat of propaganda. And they're thinking to themselves, actually, things were better 2-3 years ago under Trump. And that's an astonishing thing even to me, somebody that was generally favorable toward Trump for most of his presidency. It's amazing to realize that this entire cloud of just fantasy and delusion that is constantly being sprayed into the atmosphere by people who hate us. It's none of it's real. It's just crazy.
Yeah, this is the real problem. Right? What's been happening over the last 5-6 years is that increasingly Trump did drive people insane, because increasingly elite members of society live in an unreal world, in an unreal state. And this is why people are talking about mass psychosis, because of the Rogan special with the doctor who described us as in the grip of a mass psychosis, which is not a bad way to describe it, right? I mean, everything from the virus on out, you have people holding on to an unreal narrative. And, the truth about January 6th is that, of course, the shocking thing is that so little happened except for the fact that the even worse, the first shocker is with all the feds poking at people with sticks, with the Democrats pulling, massive changes in election law, historic levels of change in election law throughout the country in order to win, using the virus as an excuse, with $500 million plus all the hundreds of millions dumped by foundations to directly alter elections, directly work with governments to change the law, do things that the right could never even dream of doing. And for the real blame should go to the establishment Republicans. They are the cause of January 6th, by the way, because they never fought any of this stuff. They never fought the left the entire time. They weren't prepared for what had happened. But because of Trump, the base actually clued into what was going on in that election, that the left was bending the rules and the left was taking unprecedented steps in order to co-opt or manipulate the election. And the establishment Republicans did nothing. So the real shocker is that people didn't do more. That's the real shocker. The real shocker is that when the doors of the Capitol were opened to them by a bunch of feds and a few lunatics, they just walked through the Capitol and walked out. The most that happened is they shut down Pelosi's desk. The scandal is, wow, they didn't actually burn the place down like we know the left would have, because it's what they tried to do and even succeeded in setting fires in state capitals during the riots. The whole thing is fallacious, and we know that. Nonetheless, I'm still worried because it doesn't need to be real, right? The point is not to describe reality. The point is to create an unreal world and that you can then use to leverage power. And so it's almost as if, I think everything everyone said is correct as far as it goes so far. But it's almost as if, do they need it? They just need to make something up so that they can weaponize the federal government and change even more laws and rules moving into 2022 and 2024. And so, I'm of the mind that there will be a red wave, obviously. Clearly, as Spencer points out, reality is not that, even half the country gives two craps about January 6th. Trump is leading right now in the polls. The polls don't care about your feelings. The majority doesn't care about your feelings. The many doesn't care about elite opinion on either side, by the way, because there's a lot of people who've been following this for a long time who are sort of sick of Trump, even if they liked him, would like to see him go. Right now, he leads. That's the reality on the ground. But how much does that matter when what's happening is, the leveraging of unreality, of manufactured reality for the sake of power. And so, to wrap up, all they need to do is create this fake Reichstag fire situation, invoke it over and over again. And that's the impetus to then, use real power, as in foundation money, as in the power of the federal government and the national security state, to continue to push, to delegitimize, and ultimately imprison their political opponents. I don't. So in other words, it is running out of steam. That's for sure. The whole January 6th mantra, but I'm not sure if that matters and if that's even what they're banking on. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And in fact, we're seeing, Merrick Garland said, that there could be 2,500 people that they plan to arrest. And the way he's talking about it, he's saying that so far they've arrested the foot soldiers, the people who actually invaded the Capitol. But that's not really significant. He wants to go after the masterminds, presumably, people higher up. And you combine that with what Mark Elias has been running up this last week, the Democratic power strategist. He wants to invoke Section 3 of the 14th Amendment regarding, you have no one who's waged insurrection against the country can be elected to office. There's serious discussions going on about, well, we could use that to overturn the midterms. The Democrats want to do that. So, I don't know how they would do it exactly, but this is clearly the way they think. They think in terms of what story can we just put out there that we can use as cover? Look, they they destroyed Trump's presidency practically just on the basis of a completely fantastic narrative that they used to whip up, millions of people to either believe or act as though they believed. They're pretty good at that. They waged a whole campaign last year or in 2020 that the police were, going around slaughtering Black people in the streets. And they got people, to riot in every city in America. They don't need reality. Their vision, their idea is they just make reality.
Yeah, that's a great point about Elias too. I mean, people. I know, Tucker, a bunch of people have been talking about what they're doing with the January 6th Commission, but I mean, it really is to the point where they're just getting everyone. They're talking about Sean Hannity's texts, right, days after the event. I mean, so what does it matter what most people think? I mean, this isn't a democracy. It doesn't, if Mark Zuckerberg can spend $500 million to put people on the ground in government offices in a swing state to ensure the results of the election, let's stop pretending that these polls maybe even matter. Maybe Donald Trump will be the most popular person in the polls for the next 20 years. I don't know. But the question is, does it matter when right now they're just running rampant? I mean, they're going through text messages of people tangentially related. The drumbeats are constantly moving forward to just take more power and to delegitimize their opponents and use real force against them. So you do have that going. And the question is, how far can it go? And the answer appears to be pretty far when the Republicans on the right are unwilling to condemn these narratives. They're unwilling to say, no, enough. You're full of crap on the January 6th thing. And that is terrifying. On the other end of it, you do have to wonder, it does seem as if unless they pull something big, which I absolutely think they will try to do, it does look like they're going to get their ass handed to them in 2022. And the polls show over and over again kind of historic numbers, people moving to Republicans, and red states reddening, and Congress about to completely flip over. But I almost think a lot of the left hasn't even grappled with that yet. They're so used to living in the reality or the hyper reality, whatever you want to call it. So we'll see. My thinking is that we will have a red wave, but 2024 is when everything really crashes again. The train, hits the wall, and it's going to be messy. On the other hand, I know a lot of people who I respect, who I think are probably right, at least that they'll try this. That this year there will be a number of just shocking events that shouldn't shock you anymore, but shocking turns that the left will pull out of the bag of tricks because of the premises they've already established, and because they're not, they're going to want to delegitimize even further a lot of anyone on the right who is actually pushing and doesn't submit. And you're going to see the new right rise in 2022, right? You're going to see new candidates, new kinds of leaders. Some of them are, they're already out there. They're going to terrify the left, and those are the ones who are going to have to be, thrown in jail, at least in principle.
Well, right. I mean, the cowardice dimension, Matt, is, I think, really crucial. We'll find out tomorrow, in fact, and throughout this year, which Republicans are willing to sort of throw off the rhetorical shackles of this. Just, it's the shame. It's it's incredibly powerful motivator. The left is very, very good at wielding it. They've been getting away with it for a long time. I mean, never mind the last couple years, the accusation of racism, of anti-Semitism, of insurrectionism, of anti-trans, whatever, right, has always been very effective against a certain brand of Republican that just likes to be liked and wants to be respected as sort of civil and reasonable. And yeah, people are going to have to, put up or shut up about this stuff and actually stop making gestures and empty gestures in the direction of like both sidesism or what have you. And I think the jury's still out on whether there will be enough Republicans to sort of stand up in that way. We're looking at candidates that seem to, as you say, Matt, there's a new right, so there are candidates that are sort of up in 2022 that might have the cojones to do that. I want to just introduce here the sort of parallel question of the left and of the Democrats specifically, because we've been talking mostly about their strategy of obfuscation and lies and so forth. But underneath all of this, there's also this subtle current that Biden is a disaster. He's, not even beating Trump in this RCP average. He's also like really getting up there, and the Democrats can see that he's probably not an ideal 2024 candidate. Harris is also, roundly disliked. It took a nomination to the vice presidency that, to get her into this position in the first place. It seems quite impossible that I should never say impossible. It seems quite unlikely that she would be the one the machine would pick to sort of install in 2024. And so there are all of these little rumblings in the background about, who is going to be the successor. And I can sort of feel the weariness in like Nancy Pelosi's heart as she rifles through this thoroughly uninspiring docket of potential challengers. We have a few to mention. One is Michelle Obama. You may remember her as wife of Barack. She was recently mentioned on Joe Rogan, of all places. Rogan said last week, she's intelligent, she's articulate, she's the wife of the best president that we have had in our lifetime. Apparently, Michelle Obama had another marriage that I didn't know about. But in any case, she's the wife of the best president we've had in our lifetime. In terms of like a representative of intelligent, articulate people, she could win, Rogan says. So we've got her. We've got Hillary sort of randomly resurfacing. She's been running a masterclass. She's been reading aloud from her acceptance speech that she never got to give in 2016 because she was so terribly robbed. I don't know. Throw out other names, guys. And what do you think is the most likely play that Democrats will make in 2024 for presidency?
Well, it's amazing how thin their bench really is.
It's shocking.
We've commented on everybody's commented on, okay, you've got Nancy Pelosi, you've got Steny Hoyer, you've got, Dick Durbin. You've got this like really decrepit crew of geriatrics running things. And what you've got coming up are people like the Squad, Hakeem Jeffries, who's kind of like a, moderate far left Democrat, not quite to the, to the point of the Squad. Then you've got somebody like Stacey Abrams, who has yet to win an election beyond just like a state representative district in Georgia, but is just constantly talked up as like this, like the great hope of the Democratic Party. So it's really like an amazing disaster. I feel like the Republicans have, a bunch of comers, guys, younger people, people who are running, people who've won elections, who have some charisma. The Democrats keep like looking at like people like losers, Beto O'Rourke, Stacey Abrams. Again, I don't know who they think they have. But the idea that two former first ladies are who they go to as like possibles. Now, Michelle Obama, I imagine, is enjoying herself. She's got like hundreds of millions of dollars now. She can go to Italy and, buy all kinds of high fashion. She's got a place on Martha's Vineyard, like an enormous estate. I can't really imagine her wanting to go and start doing retail electoral politics. Could be wrong. It's an interesting situation.
I think the most likely scenario by far is a primary matchup between Joe Manchin and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Finally, a combo powerful enough to make the media turn its eye of Sauron away from Donald Trump. You heard it here first.
That's pretty good. We do need to start finding candidates like AOC for the right and auditioning for them in this this fake world. I don't know. This one, it's hard for me because it just makes me sick to my stomach. So let me give you two takes, because in my gut, I feel like we already left normal politics behind in 2024. Is both sides have deep-rooted narratives about how the process is diseased and corrupted, and if it's close at all, I don't think the system is already damaged. And put it this way, I think it'll be further damaged regardless, just prognosticating in the 2024 presidential process. And it's just not going to be pretty. I can see things breaking down. I can see all kinds of exceptions being made. I mean, I have very dour thoughts about 2024. I have very positive thoughts about 2022. But let's pretend for a minute. Let me put those aside. Maybe, maybe that's just the black pill getting to me, and I've had too many of them. It's eating at my liver, right? Maybe that's just my bad habits of thought. So let's put that aside. Let's pretend that it still is normal politics, and Republican government still applies. In that scenario, the smartest thing, if you just look back at history and kind of normal Republican politics, American politics, the smartest thing for the left to do would be to find, or probably more likely by blind luck stumble into, fielding candidates that are more independent, to go after the kind of barstool, right, type crowd, Joe Rogan type crowd. That would be the normal way of events. They would moderate themselves by running a Matthew McConaughey, right, for governor in Texas, outside the box candidates who are at least not woke or present as sensible, independents or moderates, whatever you want to call it. That would be normal. And they would actually, right, they'd go a long way. So take the example of McConaughey. It's a good example. The problem with McConaughey was he had to run as an independent because I wouldn't trust him at all politically. I mean, I like him and his work, but I'm very distrustful of where he's at politically. But the left couldn't have him. The smartest thing to do would have been to run someone like him as a Democrat. But they can't do that because they're so beholden to this radical ideology that sees power. So I mean, there's an easy path for the left. They would find, moderate kind of candidates, co-opt them, and run them. But right now, all those people are leaning right for good reason, because they know that the power centers and the left is just ruthlessly controlled by this radical ideology. So I do think that on the right, the potential is there as well for new candidates to arise who are more Joe Rogan types, shall we say. That would be probably extremely popular electorally, but we'll see. So I mean, in other words, they are kind of screwed, and there's a path open to them to move, but there's no indication they're going to do that at all. And if someone like that was to run, they would run as a Republican.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the serious answer of mine to this question, although that is not in any way to say that I am renouncing or defying my previous prediction, is that the presidency is being weakened. It's used to be very strong. Joe Biden has FDR hanging up there in his residence in Washington, D.C. And you look at what the presidency is now, and it's just a shell of its former self. There is an administrative state, as we all know, that cannot be removed from power. That includes, everything from the lamest and most purposeless of the phony cabinet agencies to the most lavishly funded and most secretive and most powerful of agencies. The Trump years demonstrated that it's very difficult for even a hostile president to remove these people from power. You can't really vote them out. even if you're, more conciliatory or more Machiavellian than a sort of Trump figure might be, it's still just, where do you begin and how do you pull it off and who do you replace them with? This cancer has grown within our form of government, and it has metastasized to an extent that if you start, lasering this stuff out, you're going to be cutting into multiple organ systems. This is a serious problem, and it's so bad now that it is weakening what everyone still considers to be the most powerful and important branch of government. And so, who wants to be in charge of that? We're beginning to see what we see in some of the most pathetic and futureless countries in the world, where the presidency becomes this sort of ornamental position where, the only people who can hold that position are basically criminal fools who know that they're on borrowed time and know that really their existence is at the mercy of these competing factions, and who hope that they can ultimately just keep their palace safe and accumulate as much wealth as they can off the books, and then hopefully run away as soon as their term is over or they're let out the door. This is frighteningly reminiscent of what we're looking at with the presidency in the United States. And for, all of the wild talk out there, some of which is, pretty well informed historically, and some of which is just kind of fantasy. Talk of like a Caesar of some kind or another coming in. I mean, it's not going to be a Caesar, because Caesar didn't have an administrative state to deal with like ours, and because the geopolitics of the Roman Empire or even the Roman Republic were much different from the geopolitics of the United States of America in the year 2021, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever you want. And so it wouldn't surprise me if no one was willing to step into the role of the presidency in any kind of forceful and committed way, coming off of Trump and then Biden, except for someone who is either a stooge who is backed by the most powerful people in the world, or and this is something that could tip in either direction. A sort of renegade tech person who has enough money and who also has enough credibility, and who seems to be, an almost alien figure from the future, beaming in the way so many people probably secretly deep down are desperate for, because that's the ultimate sort of decision to make when you have no more decisions left to make and you want to abdicate all responsibility. Instead of beam me up, Scotty, it's beam someone down. Someone, whether it's like a Bezos or someone else, who can say everything is melting except what I do. And so I'm kind of the only one who can do this anymore. It's time for me to decide what this office even means anymore. You had Elon Musk on one of these interviews. I think it was a Wall Street Journal, one of their higher ups, started interviewing him at some kind of conference or panel. And he said, look, CEO is kind of a meaningless term. It's not really a position. Like, the only positions that you need to file your corporation into existence are, I think he said, president, treasurer, and secretary. And he said, that's why I formally filed for my title to be tech lord. And he laughed. And it's funny, but it's also like not a joke in certain respects. And we've seen, I think, the political situation on the right become relatively more interesting and fruitful due to the presence of tech people who are willing to take risks and are willing to say what others think but do not say, and are willing to risk their futures on political interventions. It is not impossible that something similar will happen on the left. After all, there are lefties who are in tech, and there are techies who, if they kind of had to choose the most favorable environment for them to be in, they would choose one that isn't woke, but that just kind of like slouches in the leftward direction. And those people are currently being like horrendously underserved by the left. They've got enemies on the left. Even as the wokies are like, yes, give us as much technology, as much technological advancement as possible, full cyborg life, so long as we're in charge. If we can be the woke commissars, then any degree of technology is fine with us. Even still, though, that is unpalatable to the real technologists who favor the left, because what good is it, being at their level if you're stuck being number two forever? It's like, a lifetime appointment to being vice president. You can ask Kamala Harris how that would be. And so I wouldn't be surprised if someone from that world popped up and shook up the field in the way that the right has been, I think, again, fruitfully shaken up by an infusion of technologists. And we might wind up in a position where both parties are putting up candidates who are from the digital world. And then things will really get interesting, because we're going to have to actually think through in what I would hope by then would be a serious manner, simply how to preserve our form of government under digital conditions. Something that I and some others have been banging on about for these few years, but which is going to be an inescapable question. Right now, people are too demoralized and whiplashed by COVID and by the omni suck to confront the magnitude of these questions. But I think, deep down, people are aware that this is what is on the line. This is what is at stake. Someone is going to have to come up with a serious proposal that isn't going to replace our form of government with an automated woke social credit system, and isn't going to let it slide into third world potentate status with a vast administrative state that no one can ever remove from power.
Just a real quick question. I mean, so let's say very plausible that you get people in tech more active rather than less. You've already seen the signs of it. There's been candidates on both sides. It'd be actually insanely popular for a lot of people who vote Democrat to have someone like that, because they would also present as a kind of moderate, potentially, as opposed to the woke ideologues, although that seems to be the prerequisite, of course, for everything if you want to hold power. But the problem is that, take Elon Musk right now and put him into the White House. The problem is that you would hope that Tech Lord would think outside the box. That's his only chance, and bypass the system as it is. Because, of course, the problem is whoever is sitting in that chair, you're in charge of, a very small percentage of people that you brought with you, and you're driving a ship in every cabinet position, in every department of the government, every agency. You're driving a ship at the top with 95% of the people there who aren't going to listen to you if they don't agree, and are moving in one direction regardless of what you want to do. And so you sort of have the deep state on the one hand, who wants a symbolic ceremonial president and who just goes along with their wishes. And then you have the powers that be, sort of the oligarchs, and they have what they want. And you're going to have to negotiate both of those things. And so, even if you're Musk, Musk would at least directly address the situation and try to come up with solutions. But, these people don't, where's your leverage, right? What are you going to tell them to do? The Praetorian Guard, it's like the Praetorian, mass. It's the Praetorian, majority. It's an enormous Borg, enormous swarm. And somehow you have to cut off its power, cut off its, or bypass it in some way, right?
Yeah, I ultimately look, like the fiber of the American people is in very bad condition. People are mentally and physically unwell, as a rule, as a general rule. People can't run a mile. They can't shoot a firearm. They have no common sense. They struggle to make it through the day without some kind of mood stabilizer, or, they jump onto social media and they think, maybe I have multiple personalities. All of the symbols, all of the structures, all the institutions, all the cultural backstops that we have taken for granted, including consumerism, including maybe if I work at a corporation, I can have a sense of belonging. Like, maybe as long as I'm following my passion, all of these truisms, all of these sort of last ditch efforts to get people through the day-to-day of existence under these conditions. Where is it led? It is led to, there are still a lot of Americans who can make it through the day and who are sane and soulful and strong adults, capable of having and exercising responsibilities. But there is, generation after generation, there's a clear breakdown. There is a hostility toward the idea of carrying on our most basic traditions. There is a level of disenchantment. And, I know that on the docket here for us to talk about are vasectomies, among other things. People literally would rather cut off or cut out their sexual reproductive organs than start families. Think about this. There is a howling void opening up at the center of people's consciousnesses. There is a deep and abiding soul sickness and no hope of getting out of it that is settling in over the country. And this thought that people have that lockdowns, I kind of got used to it. After all, why go out? Why talk to people? Why drink? Why party? Why go to concerts? Why do anything? Why not just sit at home and wait? Well, that created a false impression. And the false impression was that we actually slowed down the pace of events through COVID. It came and it was bad. And some people died, but things seemed to be getting a little crazy there. We were all getting a little overclocked, and the hands on the clock started twirling around pretty fast. And we weren't able to understand even what was happening to us minute to minute. And then COVID came and we all got to take a breath. And we can all slow down, collect our wits, pull things back together, build back, everything got knocked over. Now we can put the blocks back one at a time. No, that's not going to happen. Things are speeding up. Things are accelerating. We are falling further behind. And by the time people who think that we can sort of slowly restart things actually get to the point where they feel like they're up and running again, they are going to find that the condition of the American people has degraded even more than they think it has by now. Tea counts in the garbage can, food that people are eating, poisonous. This is worse than even the mid to bad prognostications about anthropogenic warming. Oh, the seas will rise, and hundreds of millions of people will become refugees because they can't live at the coast anymore. Sure, that's an alarming scenario, but look around you at what has already happened, at what has been baked in, the problems that are baked into the cake of what we face as a country, as a people, as a civilization, go right down to the very roots. And, whatever kind of Game of Thrones is going on in Washington, the net effect, unless there's a major transformative change, is that the elites are eating the seed corn. They are cutting into bone, and they seem to not be able to grasp the magnitude of how quickly and comprehensively things are dropping into a very dire register. You got a few people out there who say American birth rates seem to have dropped by about half since 2006. I guess we need to import the very smartest Indians and Chinese as fast as we can to sort of make sure that America doesn't just wink out of existence over the next 2 generations. No offense to the best and brightest around the world who want to have a good life and maybe have one child or maybe half a child or maybe just a dog that they treat like a child. But if they're all coming from India and China, and that's not going to be America anymore. It's going to be, maybe something where you can have an okay life under certain conditions, but it's not going to be America. And if people begin to understand that the existence of their country is on the line, not because some bad guy is president or because some nefarious people are pulling certain levers, but because just the rot, the decay has become so deep that one push on the edifice and it's all going to buckle like a rotten tree stump, there's going to be a public reaction. And when you look around at the insane policies and the ineffective policies and the flailing that's going on, not just in the US, but across the West, what it seems like is happening is it seems like the leadership class is just trying to narcotize and immobilize and paralyze and demoralize people to an extent that once they realize how bad things are, they will not be able to get it up to take action. They won't be able to get off the couch. They won't be able to get out of bed. They won't be able to get out from behind the metaverse goggles. They'll feel a sort of no inside and be stuck and just watch something new sort of scuttle up out of oblivion and take over. That's what do you do about that? What do you do about that? And I think if for all the black pill that represents, the answer is the same that it's always been. If people stop taking responsibility for themselves and their personal relationships, their relationship with God, their relationship with their families, their place as the, carriers of the duty of the human race, they don't get out of bed in the morning, take care of themselves, rebuild the world again. It requires maintenance. It requires daily sacrifice, daily labor, unceasing labor. And a feeling that what you're doing is not an insane or absurd or pointless or sinful or counterproductive task. And unless and until the vast majority of people take that attitude and find a way spiritually and in their soul to claiming that attitude as their own, then ultimately, it really doesn't matter who's in charge. It really doesn't matter, who the corpse is propped up in front of the podium. It doesn't matter who's pulling the strings and trying to make the markets do this or that. What matters is the soul of the people. And if the soul of the people is gone, then you can say goodbye to everything else. The good news is that we can all sort of rise to the occasion in that sense right now, and we can do it every day. And the more that things fall apart, the more of us will look around and say like, hey, you know what? We might not be able to affect the entire world. Maybe we can't change the world, but you know what? Let's stop thinking about the world for a minute and start thinking about what's in our immediate environment.
Yeah, just real quick. That's why we need to band together. That's why people need to think about changing their career, banding together with people of general like mind, finding that meaning. Like now is the time, as we said in the New Year's broadcast, to make those changes, because you can still be part of something meaningful no matter how things are falling apart.
Oh boy. Well, it sounds like somebody's got a real case of the Mondays over here. Real gloomy Gus. Listen, I've just got 2 words, and that's going to change everything. I think it's going to throw everything into perspective. You're going to have a real figure ground transformation here. Tom Brady. Tom Brady is going to save America.
Feel the gestalt.
I if that guy actually stayed strong, didn't break the wokeness, and put his mind to running for office, I've been about this for a while, even though I hate the Patriots and he's my mortal enemy as a Bills fan. If he really didn't break someone of that kind of soul, yeah, I'm fine with it. I'm serious.
Yeah, he moved to Florida. I don't know if you're aware of that, but he's not on the Patriots anymore. He's a Tampa boy. He's a Tampa boy.
I know.
Once a Patriot.
No, he moved to Florida. He had that MAGA hat in his locker early on in 2016.
That's right.
And frankly, I have no idea what his capacity is, just in all the different categories of excellence. But I mean, that's the kind of soul that if they didn't break someone like that to the wokeness and ran for office in this environment, I'm all about it.
I mean, I do think
up, Tom. We'll help you with this transition. Otherwise, as I've always said, Seth, we're about the same age, Brady and myself. And I've always said, he's going to kind of peak early, right? When he starts going down, is when he's going to start to rise, which I'll still hold to, but I'll totally be the humble lesser man and advise him if he was moving forward. But he'd have to not break, and that's impossible to imagine these days for any kind of celebrity.
We can all look forward to the Brady Peterson transition of power. I think that's, one thing that we can be hopeful for about 2022. No, I mean, when James starts invoking these real primal concerns, I think we return once again to this theme that we've been hammering for like a few episodes now, which is just that, like, when you start hitting up against bedrock, like, I don't have enough money to put on the table and I can't fabricate more out of some imaginary stock market calculation that Jen Psaki is going to make, or, T counts are going down, not T cells, but T counts are going down, that people don't want to have kids, people feel lethargic, people are medicating themselves. Like, when you start coming up against that real primal bedrock of just human realities, like, it has long ceased to matter whether you condone January 6th, who does and doesn't approve of or disavow or disapprove of this or that supposedly cataclysmic event. Like, it doesn't matter what you approve of, because you're playing with real primal forces in the human psyche, and indeed in the American psyche. People feel shut out from the levers of power that determine the course of their lives. They feel like they have no access to an increasingly closed set of humans that manage really important things to them. And they increasingly, as James says, don't feel like getting up the energy to take actual control over those things. And so, yeah, it doesn't matter if you like or don't like riots, and you like or don't like so-called insurrections in that case. Like, what else are people going to start doing? In this sense, it's a tale as old as time. It's not like a feature of the digital age or of America specifically so much as just like anacyclosis and what happens when people feel locked out of the levers of control. And of course, all of the things that James described, which are new, exist and matter and are new. But also, I ever since January 6th, I have felt a little bit weary when people start, pestering senators or whatever to distance themselves publicly from Trump or whatever. It's like, it's not about whether you approve or disapprove. It's not like, and this constant accusation that by, saying this is what you get, you are somehow, validating or approving of an event is like, it is foolish talk by people who think that they can just muscle the world into conformity with their own pleasant fantasies, which increasingly bear no relationship to what's actually going on. Since James mentioned it as on the docket in the very little time we have remaining, I'll give a little context to that point about vasectomies, which is one of the many ways in which we know people feel a certain degree of self-loathing toward their own bloodlines. What this actually is a protest against Roe potentially being overturned. It's a Washington Post article. Men across America are getting vasectomies, quote, as an act of love, end quote. And we'll read just this one quotation from a fellow who did this. The procedure was a total relief, almost like the COVID shot, like I'm safe now, said Gress. I wanted to man up. So manning up here means just like getting your COVID vaccine, you snip your reproductive organs, and then you will never need to worry about having kids again. I mean, there are a few sort of things about this. One is the kind of, it brings me to mind of the "your terms are acceptable" meme, where like the sort of freakazoid lefty Wojak demands some crazy thing, and then the right wing Chad says like this is actually fine. There doesn't seem to be any acknowledgement that I can see in this movement that getting a vasectomy is actually resolves the problem so far as birth control goes that most conservatives object to in abortion. Like, having a vasectomy is not the same thing as killing a baby in the womb. And so once again, it's like pretty supremely beside the point when it comes to that. But of course, the symbolism of it is also just incredibly damning. Like, the manly thing to do is to step up and neuter yourself, like just completely cut off Like, I'm sorry. I don't want to like knock on people who get vasectomies, you know? Like, I'm actually like not. I don't have a big like, as I mentioned, I don't have like a big opposition to this as like a form of birth control. But just like I wanted to man up, and so what I did is I just cut my tubes, man. Like, and now, now I'm a man. I don't know, it's a little too much.
Yeah, this is of course, it's the last century of technology with birth control, like making it easier to control procreation, human reproduction. But the kind of soul sickness that we're talking about, I mean, it really is suicidal, right? I mean, at the very least, you make that decision, you would think there'd be some acknowledgement that I have lost something. I have lost the ability to pass something on. But that's because they regard themselves in a way as disposable. I mean, it's a materialistic life. It's all about, that meat space stuff. And that's it. And there's nothing greater. And, the rest of the time I feel depressed and take mind pills and have weird addictions because I can't handle it. Right. And it's so unhuman. I mean, you think about the grave kind of decision you're making to say, I'm not going to leave anyone behind. I'm not going to, I mean, it's just, it's a thing. And it's as if they're talking about clipping their toenails, I don't see any way out of this that doesn't take years and, a lot of drama, unfortunately. It's just very strange and kind of on seriousness and probably repulsive to future generations when they look back. But anyway, it's a suicidal tendency in the West. Like everyone just wants to die. This has been 150 years of kind of a turn that happened that's really still here, and we're all just pretending it'll go away, and it hasn't. And in the meantime, I think that everything's James talking about, like the decline that we see. We've heard about decline from the right for so long, cultural decline, yada, yada. But you think as you go through your life, like, well, at a certain point, they just say this and everything still soldiers on. Well, it's only been a short period of time. Anyone only lives in a short period of time. And now we're really starting to see, real results, real fruit come to bear. And birth rates are like this, right? I mean, we're only just starting to see the profound changes that are going to happen to all of these societies because of the decisions we've made in regard to family life. And it's just beginning, and the next century is going to be this whole century unfolding before us is going to be all about dealing with that across the Western world. And I almost don't want to talk about it because it's the kind of thing where everyone talks about it and they've been talking about it for a long time. But real and awful consequences will every day more and more start rearing their head. And it's not the kind of thing that you can change on a dime. Although, thankfully, it is fairly easy to have sex and procreate if you want to. So.
do you want to get more specific, Matt? Do we get some instructions?
Some people there is an really easy part to this. That's true.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're like running out of time, so we've got to shut this down. Although we could go on. I think in some ways, what's crystallizing in my mind as I'm listening to you guys talk, and as we're discussing, batting this around, like it's kind of the grand debate between like do not or do go gently into that good night, right? Like it's just on the one hand, you have a beleaguered people who nevertheless still genuinely want to figure out some way to be sane and whole. And on the other hand, you have this, elite driven, but increasingly popular movement to just simply switch off and just let it happen, man. Just turn the lights off, close the door on your way out and let some other group of people occupy this territory. And like you can sort of just vanish gradually into obsolescence. And what James has said is maybe the best note to end on, which is like that the solution to that dilemma is actually right in front of every one of you right now. Like, you can actually just wake up and decide that you're going to be on the side of life, on the side of not going gently into that good night, on the side of organizing and gathering with your friends and family to worship God, love your neighbor, and do good in your communities. Like, these things are all still very much within one's grasp, whoever runs for president in 2024. That's it for us. We're out of time. Thank you for listening to the Roundtable. If you want to support our work, visit claremont.org/donate. And if you want to learn more about all our projects and writing, visit our websites at americanmind.org, claremont.org, claremontreviewofbooks.com, and our brand new Washington, D.C. based Center for the American Way of Life, dc.claremont.org. Please rate, share, and subscribe at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks to the production and engineering crew, Jake Gannon and Annalisa Lee. And thank you all for listening. Talk to you next week.